When a 7-year-old black girl was told she was too poor for America's most elite prep school, the billionaire who overheard made a decision that would destroy his family's reputation and expose a conspiracy decades in the making. What he discovered next didn't just reunite a family. It brought down an entire system built to keep children like her out. Maya Johnson stood at the iron gates of Pinewood Preparatory Academy, watching privileged children walk through doors that remained locked to her. Her mother, Jasmine, a nurse working double shifts, was just $3,000 short of the tuition payment that would change her daughter's life forever. That's when Marcus Sterling, tech billionaire worth $2.8 billion, heard 6 words that would shatter everything. "I'm poor, so they won't let me in." But when he turned and saw Jasmine's face, the recognition hit like a lightning bolt. This wasn't Charity. This was the woman he'd abandoned 8 years ago, and possibly the daughter he never knew existed. The DNA test that followed would confirm his worst fears and greatest hope. Maya was his blood. But what came next would pit father against institution, family against legacy, and prove that when you threaten a billionaire's child, no system is too powerful to fall. The morning mist hung over Greenwich, Connecticut, like a silk curtain drawn across old money. Pinewood Preparatory Academy sat nestled among oak trees that had witnessed a century of privilege, their branches reaching toward Georgian brick buildings that whispered legacy with every ivy-covered stone. Marcus Sterling adjusted his Italian leather briefcase as he approached the wrought-iron gates. At 41, he moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had built a tech empire from dormitory code and venture capital dreams. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, his silver watch caught the early sunlight, and his mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating the board presentation that would secure Pinewood's new STEM Center funding. But as he reached for the gate's brass handle, a small voice stopped him cold. "I'm poor, so they won't let me in." The words were barely a whisper, spoken to no one in particular by a little girl pressed against the iron bars. She couldn't have been more than 7, with dark skin that glowed like polished mahogany and eyes that held the kind of hope that still believed doors were meant to open. Marcus froze. Not because of the words, though they cut through his businessman's armor like a blade, but because of what he saw next. A woman came running up the cobblestone path, breathless and frantic, her scrubs suggesting a night shift that had run too long. She reached for the little girl's hand, and when she looked up at the gates, Marcus Sterling felt the earth shift beneath his feet. Jasmine. 8 years melted away in an instant. 8 years since he'd last seen that face, older now, worn by responsibility and time, but unmistakably the woman who had owned his heart during those electric months at Columbia. The woman he'd left behind when Stanford called, and his father's expectations proved stronger than young love. Their eyes met through the morning light, and recognition flashed between them like lightning finding its target. Jasmine's face went pale, her grip tightening on her daughter's hand. "Marcus," she whispered. The little girl, Maya, he somehow knew without being told, looked between them with the sharp intelligence of a child who understood that grown-ups were having one of those conversations that would change everything. Marcus's mind raced, performing calculations that had nothing to do with stock portfolios or market projections. 7 years old. 8 years since he'd seen Jasmine. The timing was, "Hello, Jasmine," he said softly, his voice carrying years of regret and a question he was afraid to ask. The security guard at the gate cleared his throat impatiently. "Excuse me, sir, but if you're here for the board meeting, you should—" "Actually," Marcus interrupted, pulling out his phone without breaking eye contact with Jasmine, "I need to make a call first." He dialed his assistant. "Rebecca, it's Marcus. I need you to contact Pinewood Academy's admissions office immediately. I'm making a tuition payment for—" He looked at Jasmine, who mouthed the word silently. "Maya Johnson. Full payment, whatever it takes. Today." Maya's eyes widened. Jasmine stepped back as if she'd been slapped. "Mr. Sterling," the guard said, confused. "This little girl," Marcus said, kneeling down to Maya's eye level, "is going to school here today." But what Marcus didn't realize as he signed that check was that this wasn't charity. This was destiny. The math was terrifying and perfect. The hallways of Pinewood Preparatory Academy gleamed with the kind of perfection that only unlimited budgets could achieve. Marble floors reflected oil paintings of founding families, while crystal chandeliers cast warm light over mahogany lockers that cost more than most families' cars. Maya walked through it all with quiet dignity, her worn backpack and patched sneakers a stark contrast to the designer uniforms and leather satchels around her. But Marcus noticed something else as he observed from the administrative offices. She didn't walk like she didn't belong. She walked like she was studying everything, learning the rules of a game she intended to master. "Mr. Sterling?" Victoria Cross, the admissions director, appeared at his elbow with a clipboard and a barely concealed frown. "While we appreciate your generous contribution, I must say this is highly irregular. We have procedures, waiting lists, academic evaluations. Does Maya not meet your academic standards?" Marcus asked, watching through the window as Maya raised her hand in what appeared to be an advanced mathematics discussion. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, no, her test scores are actually quite remarkable, but then what's the problem?" "The problem, Mr. Sterling, is that this school operates on traditions, legacy admissions. Proper channels we can't simply—" Marcus turned from the window, his voice taking on the edge that had made corporate lawyers think twice. "Ms. Cross, I've just funded your new STEM center to the tune of $12 million. I think we can handle one exceptional 7-year-old, don't you?" Meanwhile, in classroom 2B, Maya was having a different kind of conversation. She sat next to Sophie Chen, a quiet girl with thick glasses who had offered to share her colored pencils during art time. "Where did you come from?" Sophie whispered as they worked on their drawings. "The city," Maya replied simply, carefully coloring inside the lines of what looked like a tree with deep roots and wide branches. "But like, which private school? Everyone here comes from somewhere fancy." Maya paused, her crayon hovering over the paper. "I came from Hoping," she said finally. Their teacher, Miss Thompson, a kind woman in her 30s who had taught at Pinewood for 5 years, noticed the exchange and approached their table. "Maya, would you like to share your drawing with the class?" Maya held up her artwork, a tree with its roots visible underground, spreading wide and deep. "It's about belonging," she said. "See, the roots go deep, but the branches reach toward the light. Sometimes you can't see how strong something is until you look at the whole picture." Miss Thompson blinked, taken aback by the metaphor from a 7-year-old. Around the classroom, other children had drawn houses, dogs, rainbows, typical second-grade fare. Maya had drawn philosophy. Back in the administrative wing, Marcus found himself lingering after his board meeting had concluded. He told himself he was simply ensuring Maya's transition went smoothly, but the truth was more complicated. Every time he caught a glimpse of her, solving math problems with intuitive leaps that reminded him of his own childhood, asking questions that cut straight to the heart of complex issues, he felt a recognition that went deeper than physical resemblance. When the dismissal bell rang, Marcus positioned himself near the front entrance, ostensibly checking his phone. Maya emerged with a small group of children, her head held high despite the obvious whispers and stares from parents waiting in luxury cars. Jasmine appeared moments later, still in her scrubs, fatigue written in the lines around her eyes. When she saw Marcus, she stopped short. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. Maya looked up at both of them, her young face serious. "Are you my dad?" she asked Marcus directly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt his chest tighten, felt years of wondering and regret crystallize into this single moment, with this extraordinary child who had his eyes, his curiosity and, if he was being honest, his stubborn refusal to accept simple answers to complex questions. "I don't know yet, sweetheart," he said finally, "but I'm trying to find out." As Marcus watched Maya solve problems that children twice her age struggled with, one thought consumed him. She had his eyes, his mind, and exactly 7 years of life he'd missed. He had to know the truth. The small cafe on Greenwich Avenue buzzed with the quiet conversations of afternoon coffee and business deals, but in the corner booth where Marcus and Jasmine sat, the air crackled with 8 years of unspoken truth. Maya was at school, her second day at Pinewood, and for the first time since Marcus had appeared at those gates, Jasmine had agreed to sit down and talk. Really talk. "You look good," Marcus said, then immediately felt foolish. 8 years of separation, a daughter who might be his, and he was making small talk about appearances. Jasmine stirred her coffee slowly, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from another long shift. "You look exactly the same," she replied. "Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive everything. Some things never change." "Jasmine, I don't," She held up a hand. Don't start with apologies or explanations. I need to know why you're here, really here. Because paying for Maya's school is one thing, but showing up, lingering around, asking questions, that's something else entirely. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Is she mine? The question sat between them like a lit fuse. Jasmine's coffee cup trembled slightly in her hands. Does it matter? She asked finally. Does it matter? Marcus repeated, incredulous. Jasmine, if Maya is my daughter, then what? You'll what exactly? Her voice rose slightly, then she caught herself and glanced around the cafe. You'll ride in like some knight in shining armor and save us? Fix everything with your money and your connections? I'll be her father. You had your chance to be a father, Marcus, 8 years ago. You chose Stanford. You chose your future. You chose... I didn't know. The words came out sharper than he intended. I didn't know you were pregnant. If I had known, you would have what? Married me? Given up your dreams? Your family's expectations. Jasmine shook her head. You would have resented me, resented her, and eventually you would have left anyway, but it would have hurt worse. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, the careful composure he wore like armor beginning to crack. You don't get to make that choice for me, Jasmine. You don't get to decide what I would have done. I was 22 and pregnant and alone, she shot back. I made the best choice I could with the information I had, which was that Marcus Sterling was a brilliant, ambitious man who had bigger things ahead of him than an unplanned pregnancy with a girl from the Bronx. The silence stretched between them, filled with hurt and regret and the weight of decisions that couldn't be undone. She's extraordinary, Marcus said finally. Maya. Yesterday I watched her explain to her classmates why trees need both roots and branches to survive. 7 years old, and she's already thinking in metaphors that most adults can't grasp. Jasmine's expression softened slightly. She's always been like that, always asking the big questions, always seeing connections that other people miss. Sometimes I think she understands the world better than I do. She gets that from you. And from you, if you're really her father. Marcus met her eyes. I am, aren't I? Jasmine was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the tree-lined street, where expensive cars carried expensive children to expensive lives. The timing's right, she said finally. The resemblance is undeniable. But Marcus knowing and being are two different things. You can't just write a check and become someone's father overnight. Then what do I do? You decide if you're ready to be what she needs. Not what you think she needs, but what she actually needs, which is consistency, stability, someone who won't disappear when things get complicated or inconvenient. Marcus leaned back in his chair, the magnitude of what she was saying beginning to settle in. And if I'm ready? If I want to be her father? Then we do this right. Legal paternity test, clear boundaries. And you understand that I've been her whole world for 7 years, and I'm not about to let anyone, even you, disrupt that stability unless you're absolutely committed. I want the test, Marcus said without hesitation. I figured you would. Jasmine reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. I already made an appointment, tomorrow at 10. Marcus stared at the card. A DNA testing facility in New Haven. You knew this was coming. I've known this was coming for 7 years. Every time Maya asked about her father, every time she wondered why she was so different from the other kids in our neighborhood, every time she showed that brilliant mind that could only have come from... She gestured at him. From someone like you. What did you tell her about her father? The truth that he was someone I cared about very much, but that life took us in different directions. That he was smart and kind and would love her if he knew her. Marcus felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. And now? Now we find out if that's still true. From outside the cafe window, neither of them noticed the figure sitting in a black sedan across the street, taking photos with a long-lens camera. David Mitchell had been following the news coverage of Maya's mysterious benefactor with great interest, and what he'd discovered about Marcus Sterling's sudden charitable interest in a specific little girl had given him some very profitable ideas. When Jasmine whispered, "You chose Stanford, I chose to protect our daughter," Maya heard every word from behind the classroom door. What happened next would force them all to face a truth 8 years in the making. The DNA testing facility in New Haven was clinically sterile, all white walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Marcus sat in one chair, Maya in another, both of them swabbing the inside of their cheeks with what looked like oversized cotton swabs. "This doesn't hurt," Maya observed, more curious than concerned. "Why do people make such a big deal about it?" Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the lab technician, smiled as she labeled the samples. "Sometimes the knowing is scarier than the doing," she said gently. "Results will be ready in 48 hours. Jasmine watched from the corner of the room, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. She'd barely slept the night before, alternating between relief that the truth would finally come out and terror about what that truth might change. "What happens if he is my dad?" Maya asked as they prepared to leave. The question was directed at her mother, but her eyes were on Marcus. "Then we figure out what that means," Jasmine replied carefully. "All of us together. Will I still live with you?" "Of course, baby. That never changes. Will he live with us?" The question hung in the air like a complexity none of them were prepared to address. Marcus cleared his throat. "Maya, families come in all different shapes," he said. "What matters is that the people who love you are in your life, in whatever way works best for everyone." It was a diplomatic answer, but Maya wasn't satisfied. "Do you want to be my dad?" Marcus knelt down to her eye level, his voice thick with emotion he wasn't used to showing. "More than anything I've ever wanted in my life." That afternoon, as news of the DNA test somehow leaked to local media, the Sterling family compound in Greenwich received its first unwelcome visitor in years. Victoria Sterling, Marcus's mother and matriarch of one of Connecticut's oldest families, sat in her mahogany-paneled study, reading the headline on her iPad with the kind of controlled fury that had intimidated society pages for 3 decades. "Tech billionaire's secret daughter. Sterling family DNA test sparks questions about elite academy admission." The article was accompanied by a photo that made her blood run cold. Marcus walking hand in hand with a young black girl outside Pinewood Preparatory Academy. She picked up her phone and dialed her son's number. "Mother," Marcus answered on the first ring. "My office. Now." The line went dead. An hour later, Marcus stood in the same study where he'd been lectured about family expectations, social responsibility, and the weight of the Sterling name since he was old enough to understand disappointment. Victoria sat behind her antique desk like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. "Explain to me," she said without preamble, "how my son, a man I raised to understand discretion, propriety, and the responsibilities that come with our name, has managed to create a scandal involving a situation from his college years." "Her name is Maya," Marcus said quietly, "and she's not a situation. She's possibly your granddaughter." Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the desk. "Marcus, darling, I understand that young men sometimes make choices in their university years. But paying for private school, DNA tests, public appearances, this isn't charitable contribution. This is acknowledgement. Do you understand the implications?" "I understand that I might have a daughter who has spent 7 years of her life wondering why her father wasn't there for her. And I understand that this family has spent 2 centuries building a reputation that can be destroyed by one emotional decision." Victoria's voice remained level, but her eyes blazed. "The Sterling name opens doors, Marcus. It creates opportunities. It carries weight in boardrooms and on charitable boards and in the circles that matter. But it also carries expectations." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that there are ways to handle these situations quietly. Trust funds, private arrangements, discreet support that doesn't require integration into family functions or social circles." Marcus stared at his mother, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. "You want me to hide her. I want you to protect the family legacy while also doing what's right for the child. Surely you can see the difference." "No," Marcus said simply, "I can't." "Marcus." "No, Mother. If Maya is my daughter, and I believe she is, then she's a Sterling. Full stop. Not a secret. Not a side arrangement. Not a charitable tax deduction. A Sterling." Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "Do you have any idea what the social implications of this will be? The questions about your judgment? The whispers about the kind of woman who—" "Careful," Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying a warning. "You're talking about the mother of your possible granddaughter." Victoria stood slowly, her silk blouse and pearl necklace making her look like a portrait of old money respectability. "I'm talking about protecting what we've built. But if you're determined to proceed with this situation, Then you'll do it with the understanding that choices have consequences. What does that mean? It means the family will support whatever decision you make, but it also means that you'll be making that decision with full knowledge of what it might cost. As Marcus left his mother's study, he didn't notice the man sitting in the parking lot of the coffee shop across from the Sterling compound, taking more photographs and making careful notes about family dynamics and public reactions. David Mitchell was beginning to see a very profitable opportunity in the Sterling family's moment of transition. What the DNA would reveal would either unite a family or destroy 3 lives forever, because what none of them knew was that someone else had been watching, waiting, and was about to make a claim that would shatter everything they thought they knew about Maya's true identity. The call came at 7:43 a.m. on a Thursday that started like any other, but would end with everything changed. "Mr. Sterling, Doctor." Hendrix's voice carried the professional neutrality of someone who delivered life-altering news as a regular part of her workday. "We have your results." Marcus stood in his kitchen, coffee growing cold in his hands, while outside his penthouse windows Manhattan hummed with its usual urgency. "And? 97% probability. You are Maya Johnson's biological father." The words hit him like a physical force. He'd known somehow in the way that recognition runs deeper than logic, but hearing it confirmed transformed knowing into reality. "Mr. Sterling, are you there?" "Yes," he managed. "Yes, I'm here. Can you send the report to both Jasmine Williams and myself?" "Of course. Congratulations, sir." "Congratulations." As if discovering you'd missed the first 7 years of your daughter's life was something to celebrate. 20 minutes later, Marcus's phone rang again. "It's confirmed." Jasmine's voice was barely a whisper. "She's yours." "How do you feel about that?" A long pause, terrified, relieved, angry, grateful all at once. Another pause. "How do you feel about that?" "Like, I need to learn how to be someone's father very quickly. Marcus, we need to talk about how we tell Maya. She's been asking questions since the test, and she deserves to hear it from us before she hears it from anywhere else." But it was already too late for that. At Pinewood Preparatory Academy, Maya sat in the principal's office with Miss Thompson, both of them staring at Rebecca Foster, the admissions director, who held a printed email in her trembling hands. "I'm afraid there's been a development," Foster said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We've received some concerning information about your enrollment here, Maya." Miss Thompson frowned. "What kind of information?" "Questions about the circumstances of her admission, about whether proper procedures were followed, about—" Foster's voice dropped. "About whether her benefactor's motives were entirely charitable." At that moment, Maya's keen 7-year-old mind made connections that adults had been dancing around for days. "He's my dad, isn't he?" The silence in the room was answer enough. Meanwhile, across town, Victoria Sterling was dealing with her own crisis. The Society page editor of Greenwich Today had called requesting comment on rumors about her son's newfound family responsibilities, and 3 board members of her favorite charity had already phoned to express concern about potential controversies affecting their upcoming gala. But the call that truly shattered her composure came from her oldest friend, Margaret Hayes. "Victoria, darling, I'm calling because I care about you and your family, but there are conversations happening in certain circles, questions about Marcus's judgment, about what this means for Sterling Industries board seats, about whether the family can maintain its standards with this new complexity." Victoria understood. In the carefully coded language of their social circle, Margaret was delivering a message. Scandal was approaching, and positions were being chosen. "I see," Victoria replied calmly. "And what is your position, Margaret?" "My position is that I hope Marcus knows what he's doing, for everyone's sake." The line went dead, and Victoria Sterling realized that her son's decision to claim his daughter was going to cost them more than pride. That evening, Marcus picked Maya up from school personally for the first time. She climbed into his Tesla with the kind of quiet dignity she'd shown since the day he met her, but he could see questions building behind her eyes. "The test came back," she said as they pulled away from Pinewood's circular drive. "It did. Are you my dad?" Marcus pulled over in a small park a few blocks from the school. Trees lined the pathway where early evening joggers passed, and playground equipment sat empty in the fading light. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." Maya nodded, as if this confirmed something she'd already decided. "Good," she said. "I was hoping you were." "Why?" "Because you look at me like you see me, really see me. Not like I'm a problem to be solved or a charity case to be helped. You look at me like I matter." Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion he wasn't equipped to handle. "You do matter, Maya. You matter more than anything. What happens now? I don't know yet, but we figure it out together. You, me, and your mom. Will people be mad that you're my dad?" The question was asked with the innocent directness that children use to cut straight to the heart of complex adult problems. "Some people might be," Marcus admitted, "but their opinions don't matter as much as what we think about each other." Maya considered this. "Okay, but when they're mad, remember that I didn't ask for this to be complicated. I just asked to go to school." As they sat in the car watching the sunset, paint the sky in shades of gold and amber, neither of them noticed the photographer across the street, capturing what would become tomorrow's front-page photo, billionaire Marcus Sterling and his newly confirmed daughter sharing what appeared to be an intimate conversation in a moment of family connection. By morning, that photo would be everywhere, and the Sterling family's private reckoning would become a very public controversy. The DNA results were clear. 97% probability. Marcus Sterling was Maya's father. But as celebration turned to strategy, none of them realized the real battle was just beginning. The Emergency Parent-Teacher Association meeting at Pinewood Preparatory Academy was called for 7 p.m. on a Friday evening, ostensibly to discuss recent irregularities in our admission processes. But everyone in the mahogany-paneled boardroom knew they were really there to decide what to do about Maya Johnson. 37 parents sat around the polished conference table, their combined net worth exceeding that of several small countries. These were hedge fund managers, pharmaceutical heiresses, technology moguls, and old money families whose names graced buildings from Manhattan to the Hamptons. They were accustomed to problems that could be solved with donations, legal maneuvers, or carefully applied social pressure. Maya Johnson represented a different kind of problem entirely. "Let's be clear about what we're dealing with here," announced Richard Pemberton, whose great-grandfather had endowed Pinewood's original library and whose own son was currently struggling through 8th grade, despite every academic advantage money could buy. "This isn't about the child per se, it's about precedent." Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. "We all support diversity," added Catherine Walsh, whose pharmaceutical fortune had been built on patents that expired decades ago, but whose social position remained unassailable. "But there are processes, standards, ways of ensuring that new families understand and can contribute to our community values." Rebecca Foster, the admissions director, sat at the head of the table looking like someone who had not slept in days. The Sterling donation was substantial, enough to fund our new STEM center and expand our scholarship program significantly. "Which brings us to the real issue," Pemberton continued. "Marcus Sterling essentially purchased admission for this child without any of the normal vetting processes. No family interviews, no assessment of social fit, no consideration of how this impacts our carefully balanced community. What none of them said aloud, but all of them understood, was that Maya's presence forced them to confront uncomfortable questions about who belonged in their children's classrooms and what that belonging should cost." Margaret Hayes, Victoria Sterling's longtime friend, cleared her throat delicately. "Perhaps we should consider what's best for the child herself. Pinewood has a very particular culture, very specific expectations. Sometimes kindness means acknowledging when someone might be happier in an environment more suited to their background." Translation: Maya was black, poor and different, and therefore unwelcome. "I disagree." The voice came from Dr. Elena Rodriguez, whose biotech company had revolutionized cancer treatment, and whose own daughter, Sophia, was one of Maya's few friends at school. "I've observed Maya in academic settings. She's intellectually gifted, socially mature, and adapting beautifully to our curriculum. The only irregularity I see is that she's outperforming children who've had every advantage since birth." An uncomfortable silence followed. "That may be true," Walsh replied carefully, "but we also must consider the broader implications. If we allow exceptions to our admission processes, where does it end? Do we compromise our standards every time someone writes a large enough check? Our standards, Doctor, Rodriguez shot back, should be about academic excellence and character, not about whether a child's family has been wealthy for multiple generations. Meanwhile, in a different part of Greenwich, Victoria Sterling was having her own meeting. She sat across from David Mitchell in the private dining room of the Greenwich Country Club, a man whose credentials seemed impressive on paper, but whose eyes held the calculating gleam of someone who saw opportunity in other people's vulnerabilities. "Mrs. Sterling," Mitchell said, cutting into his filet mignon with surgical precision, "I appreciate you taking the time to hear me out. Mr. Mitchell, your phone call raised some interesting questions. You claim to have information relevant to my family's current situation." David smiled the kind of smile that lawyers practice in mirrors. "I claim to be Maya Johnson's biological father." Victoria's wineglass paused halfway to her lips. "I beg your pardon. Jasmine Williams and I were involved romantically approximately 8 years ago. The timing of Maya's birth corresponds exactly with our relationship. I was unaware of the pregnancy at the time. Ms. Williams chose not to inform me, but recent media coverage has brought the situation to my attention. Do you have proof of this relationship?" David reached into his briefcase and withdrew a manila folder. "Photos, text messages, a witness who can attest to our involvement during the relevant time frame." Victoria studied the photos, David and Jasmine at what appeared to be various social events, looking comfortable and intimate. The timestamps matched his claims. "What do you want, Mr. Mitchell?" "Justice for my daughter. Recognition of my parental rights, and perhaps a compensation for the years of child support I was denied the opportunity to provide." Victoria Sterling was many things: cold, calculating, protective of her family's status, but she was not stupid. She recognized a con artist when she saw one, even a sophisticated one, but she also recognized an opportunity. "Mr. Mitchell, assuming your claims have merit, what exactly are you proposing?" "A paternity test, naturally, full legal recognition of my rights as Maya's father, and a discussion about how best to handle this situation in a way that serves everyone's interests." What he didn't say, but what Victoria understood perfectly, was that his primary interest was financial, and his willingness to challenge Marcus's newly discovered paternity could provide exactly the kind of complication that might convince her son to handle the Maya situation more. Discreetly, back at Pinewood, the PTA meeting was reaching its conclusion. "All those in favor of requesting a review of Maya Johnson's admission and a clarification of our policies regarding non-standard enrollment procedures?" Pemberton asked. 23 hands rose. Opposed? 14 hands led by Dr. Rodriguez and a few other parents who had either met Maya personally or simply believed in fairness over tradition. Rebecca Foster looked ill. I'll prepare a formal review for the Board of Trustees." As the meeting dispersed, parents clustered in small groups, their conversations hushed but intense. Some discussed Maya with the kind of clinical detachment usually reserved for quarterly earnings reports. Others wondered aloud about Marcus Sterling's judgment and what his situation might mean for the school's reputation. None of them noticed 11-year-old James Pemberton recording portions of their conversation on his phone from outside the boardroom door, or his plan to share what he'd heard with his younger sister's new friend, Maya Johnson. When Victoria Sterling stood before the PTA and declared, "This school was built on standards, not charity cases," she had no idea that her words were being recorded and would soon be heard by the entire nation. The video went viral at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. James Pemberton had uploaded his recording to TikTok with the caption, "Rich parents meeting about my friend's classmate being too poor for school," and by dawn, it had been shared 40,000 times. By noon, it was trending on Twitter, dissected on morning talk shows, and picking up momentum on every major social media platform. The audio was clear enough to identify voices, including Victoria Sterling's declaration about standards versus charity cases and Richard Pemberton's assertion that Maya represented a precedent problem. But it was Margaret Hayes' comment about Maya being happier in an environment more suited to her background that truly set the internet ablaze. Marcus first learned about the recording when his phone started ringing at 6 a.m. with calls from journalists, public relations firms, and concerned board members at Sterling Industries. By the time he reached his office, His assistant had fielded 37 interview requests, and his legal team was already drafting statements. "Sir," Rebecca announced as he strode past her desk, "CNN, NBC, and the Washington Post are all requesting immediate comment. Your mother has called 6 times, and—" She hesitated. "There's a man named David Mitchell in Conference Room B who says he needs to speak with you urgently about Maya." Marcus stopped walking. "Who is David Mitchell?" "He claims to be Maya's biological father." The world tilted slightly on its axis. Marcus had prepared for opposition from his family, resistance from Pinewood's elite, even negative media coverage. He had not prepared for someone to challenge Maya's paternity entirely. "Send him in," Marcus said grimly. David Mitchell walked into the conference room with the confidence of a man who held cards he hadn't shown yet. Tall, well-dressed, with the kind of generic handsomeness that suggested expensive grooming rather than natural genetics, he extended his hand to Marcus with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Sterling, thank you for seeing me. I know this must be a difficult time." Marcus didn't take the offered hand. "You claim to be Maya's father. I don't claim to be anything. I am Maya's father. Jasmine Williams and I were together during the period when Maya was conceived. I have documentation, witnesses, and I'm prepared to take a paternity test to prove it. Where have you been for 7 years?" David's expression shifted to practiced regret. "I had no idea Maya existed. Jasmine chose not to tell me about the pregnancy. I only learned about my daughter when this media coverage began, and I saw her photograph. The resemblance is unmistakable." Marcus studied the man across from him, his tech entrepreneur's instincts screaming that something was fundamentally wrong with this picture. "What do you want?" "To know my daughter, to establish my parental rights, and to ensure that Maya's best interests are protected during this very public transition." "Her best interests?" "Mr. Sterling, you're a good man trying to do the right thing. But the media attention, the family conflict, the social pressure Maya is facing at that school, is that really what's best for a 7-year-old child? Perhaps a more stable arrangement might serve everyone better." The subtext was clear. David Mitchell was offering Marcus an exit strategy from a complicated situation in exchange for financial compensation and a return to his previously uncomplicated life. "Get out," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sorry?" "Get out of my office, and if you come near my daughter again, you'll discover exactly how much legal firepower a billionaire can deploy when someone threatens his family." David's mask slipped slightly, revealing the calculating opportunist underneath. "Your daughter. That remains to be determined. I'll be in touch, Mr. Sterling, through my attorneys." As David left, Marcus called Jasmine immediately. "There's a man named David Mitchell claiming to be Maya's father," he said without preamble. A long silence. Then, "Oh God, you know him?" Yes. We dated briefly. Very briefly. But Marcus, the timing, could he be Maya's father? I don't think so. The relationship was almost over when... But technically, it's possible. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I never thought... We need another paternity test, all 3 of us. Maya's going to be so confused. She just accepted that you're her father, and now we find out the truth, whatever it is. Meanwhile, at Pinewood Preparatory Academy, Maya was discovering that viral fame was not particularly pleasant when you were 7 years old. She sat in Miss Thompson's classroom during lunch, having chosen to eat inside rather than face the playground, where other children stared and whispered. Some were curious, some were sympathetic, but many were parroting opinions they'd heard from their parents about situations and complications and people who don't belong. "Maya," Miss Thompson said gently, sitting beside her, "how are you handling all this attention?" Maya looked up from her sandwich, peanut butter and jelly that Jasmine had packed that morning before heading to another double shift. "Miss Thompson, do you think I belong here?" The question hit like a physical blow. "Maya, you absolutely belong here. You're one of the brightest students I've ever taught. But some of the other kids said their parents think I'm only here because Marcus feels sorry for me." Miss Thompson felt her heart break a little. "Maya, do you feel sorry for yourself?" "No." "Then why should anyone else? You're here because you're smart, kind, and curious. Everything else is just noise." Maya nodded, but her young face carried a weight that no 7-year-old should have to bear. That afternoon, as Marcus picked Maya up from school, They were greeted by a cluster of news vans and photographers. Maya instinctively reached for his hand as camera flashes began popping. "Mr. Sterling, can you comment on the allegations about Maya's paternity? Maya, how do you feel about all this attention? Is it true you're considering withdrawing Maya from Pinewood?" Marcus shielded Maya from the cameras and guided her quickly to his car. As they drove away, she sat quietly in the back seat, processing the chaos. "Are they always going to follow us now?" she asked. "Not always, but Maya, I need to tell you something. There's going to be another test. Another man thinks he might be your father." Maya's voice was very small. "Do you think he is? I think you're my daughter in every way that matters, but we need to be sure. What if the test says he's my dad instead of you?" Marcus pulled over again, turning to face her fully. "Then we'll deal with that. But Maya, being someone's father isn't just about biology. It's about showing up, it's about caring, it's about being there when things get complicated. Will you still be there? Even if the test says something different? Wild horses couldn't drag me away from you now." As the headlines spread across social media, "Maya belongs" trending worldwide, someone in a downtown law office smiled and reached for their phone. What they were planning would test everything the Sterling family thought they'd won. The second DNA test was scheduled for Thursday morning at a different facility, this time with enhanced security protocols to prevent media interference. Marcus, Jasmine, Maya, and David Mitchell sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs in a sterile waiting room that smelled of disinfectant and anxiety. Maya swung her legs from her chair, studying David with the frank curiosity of childhood. "Are you really my dad?" she asked him directly. David offered his practiced smile. "I might be, sweetheart. Wouldn't that be nice? To have a daddy who could give you a normal life away from all this craziness?" "I like my life," Maya replied simply. "And I already have a daddy." She looked at Marcus. "He bought me school." Jasmine shifted uncomfortably. "Maya, let's wait for the test results before we decide anything." But Maya wasn't finished. "If you're my dad, where have you been?" David's composure slipped slightly. "Well, your mother didn't tell me. Mom didn't tell Marcus either, but he's here now. Where were you yesterday or last week or on my birthday?" The waiting room fell silent. 7-year-old Maya had cut through David's carefully constructed narrative with the surgical precision of pure logic. Dr. Williams, the lab technician, called them back for the samples. As they filed into the testing room, David's phone buzzed with a text message. "Phase 2 ready, Sterling family meeting scheduled. V." The conspiracy between David Mitchell and Victoria Sterling had been carefully orchestrated. Victoria would apply pressure from within the family, highlighting the scandal and social complications Maya's presence created. David would provide a convenient alternative, a different father who could take Maya away from the spotlight and the Sterling family complications in exchange for appropriate financial compensation. What neither of them anticipated was Maya herself. After the test, as they waited outside the facility, Maya turned to David again. "What's your favorite color?" she asked. Blue? What's my favorite food?" David glanced helplessly at Jasmine. "Pizza? What makes me sad?" I don't know, sweetheart, but I'd like to learn." Maya nodded solemnly. "You seem nice, but you don't know me. Marcus knows that I like green because it's the color of growing things. He knows I don't like pizza because the cheese is too greasy, but I love chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs. And he knows that what makes me sad is when people treat other people like they don't matter." She looked up at Marcus. "Can we go home now?" As they walked to the car, David fell into step beside Marcus. "Look, Sterling, I can see you care about the kid, but this whole situation, the media circus, your family's resistance, the school problems, it's not good for her. I'm offering you a way out." "A way out?" "I take paternity. Raise her quietly away from all this. You contribute financially, child support, education fund, whatever feels appropriate. Everyone wins. Maya gets a stable life, you get your privacy back, and I get to know my daughter." Marcus stopped walking. "How much?" "Excuse me? How much is this going to cost me? Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? You're not Maya's father. You're a con artist who saw an opportunity in a viral news story." David's mask finally slipped completely. "Prove it. The test will show what it shows. And until then, I have just as much claim to that little girl as you do." "No," Marcus said quietly. "You don't. because I didn't show up when it was convenient or profitable. I showed up when I heard her whisper that she was too poor to belong. And I'll keep showing up long after the cameras are gone and the story moves on to something else. That evening, Victoria Sterling called an emergency family meeting at the Greenwich compound. Marcus arrived to find not just his mother, but 3 Sterling Industries board members and the family's longtime attorney. "Marcus," Victoria began without preamble, "we need to discuss the situation." "What situation is that, Mother?" "The media attention is affecting Sterling Industries' stock price. We've had 3 major clients express concerns about continued partnerships. The Family Foundation has received calls questioning our judgment. This has moved beyond personal family matters into business implications." Board member Harrison Blackwell cleared his throat. "Marcus, we're not questioning your motives, but we need to consider whether the visibility of this situation is in the company's best interests." "Or Maya's best interests," Victoria added smoothly. "This David Mitchell individual offers a way to resolve the paternity question quietly. Maya could have a father who isn't under constant media scrutiny." Marcus looked around the room at people he'd known his entire life, people who had celebrated his business successes, attended his charity galas, and profited from his innovations. People who were now suggesting he abandon his daughter to protect stock prices. "I see," he said calmly. "And if the DNA test confirms that I'm Maya's father, then we support whatever decision you make," Attorney Patricia Wells replied carefully. "But we encourage you to consider all options for managing the complexities that might arise." "Complexities?" "Marcus," Victoria's voice softened slightly, "I'm not asking you to abandon the child. I'm asking you to consider whether being a public Sterling is what's best for her. Perhaps a quieter arrangement." "Stop." Marcus stood up. "Just stop. Maya is not a problem to be managed or a complication to be minimized. She's my daughter. And if any of you can't accept that, then you're welcome to find other investments for your money and other families to associate with." He walked toward the door, then turned back. "The test results come back tomorrow. When they confirm what we already know, that Maya is my daughter, I'm going to make sure she knows she belongs everywhere I belong, including in this family." As Marcus left the compound, he didn't see David Mitchell's car parked across the street, or notice David making notes about family dynamics and potential pressure points. What David didn't realize was that his conversation with Marcus had been recorded by building security cameras, and that Marcus Sterling had not built a billion-dollar empire by leaving anything to chance. With David Mitchell's lawyers filed paternity papers claiming Marcus had no right to Maya, the real DNA results sat unopened on Marcus's desk. What those results would prove wouldn't just determine who Maya's father was. It would expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of elite society and change the Sterling family legacy forever. The call came at exactly 9 a.m. Friday morning, precisely 72 hours after the second round of testing. Dr. Williams's voice carried the professional neutrality of someone delivering results that would reshape lives. "Mr. Sterling, we have conclusive results from all 3 paternity tests." Marcus sat in his office, staring out at Manhattan's skyline while Jasmine and Maya waited in the reception area. David Mitchell had insisted on being present for the results, confident in whatever scheme he was running. Marcus Sterling, 99. 97% probability of paternity, Dr. Williams continued. David Mitchell, 0% probability. Excluded as biological father. The relief that flooded through Marcus was so intense it was almost painful. "You're certain, completely certain, Mr. Mitchell is not Maya's biological father. You are." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling years of uncertainty crystallize into absolute clarity. "Can you repeat those results in front of everyone?" "Of course." 5 minutes later, they sat in Dr. Williams' office, Marcus, Jasmine, Maya, and David Mitchell, whose confident demeanor was beginning to crack around the edges. "The results are conclusive," Dr. Williams announced. "Marcus Sterling is Maya's biological father with 97% certainty. David Mitchell is excluded as a possible father." Maya looked at David with the frank assessment of childhood. "So you're not my dad?" David's face cycled through several expressions before settling on barely controlled anger. "There must be some mistake. I demand a retest." "Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Williams interrupted, Our testing protocols are extremely rigorous. These results are definitive. This is ridiculous. I have photos, documentation of a brief relationship with Maya's mother 8 years ago, Marcus said calmly, which doesn't make you her father. It makes you someone who saw an opportunity in a news story and decided to exploit it. David stood abruptly. This isn't over. Actually, Marcus replied, it is. Because while you've been playing whatever game this is, my security team has been very busy. Would you like to know what they found? David's face went pale. 3 previous paternity fraud attempts in different states. A history of targeting wealthy men with complicated family situations. And most interesting of all, a financial relationship with someone very close to my family, who shall remain nameless, but who apparently thought paying you to claim Maya would solve their social discomfort. David Mitchell realized his con had been thoroughly exposed. Without another word, he left the office, presumably to discover that his promised payment from Victoria Sterling would not be forthcoming now that his fraud had been revealed. Maya watched him go, then turned to Marcus. So you're really my dad? I'm really your dad. Good, I was hoping that wouldn't change. After David's departure, Jasmine finally spoke. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I should have known. You had no reason to expect someone to target Maya like that, but now we know the truth and we can move forward. What happens now? Marcus knelt down to Maya's eye level. Now we figure out how to be a family, all of us together. Maya considered this seriously. Will I get to keep living with Mom? Of course. Will you live with us? Marcus glanced at Jasmine, a conversation passing between them that didn't require words. We'll figure out what works best for everyone. But Maya, no matter what, you'll have both of us in your life as much as you want. What about the people who don't want me at school? Let me worry about them. That afternoon, Marcus called a press conference. Standing outside Sterling Industries headquarters, with Maya and Jasmine beside him, he addressed the gathered media with the kind of commanding presence that had made him a business legend. I want to make a few things clear, he began. First, the paternity tests have confirmed what I already knew in my heart. Maya Johnson is my daughter. Second, the individual who claimed otherwise has been exposed as a fraud with a history of similar schemes. Third, and most importantly, Maya is a Sterling. She belongs in my life, in my family, and anywhere else she chooses to be. A reporter called out, Mr. Sterling, what about the resistance from Pinewood Academy's parent community? Marcus's expression hardened slightly. Maya earned her place at Pinewood through intelligence, character, and academic excellence. Anyone who believes she doesn't belong there is welcome to examine their own assumptions about what belonging should require. What about your family's concerns about publicity? My family will adapt to having Maya in it, just as Maya has adapted to having us in hers. Anyone who can't make that adjustment is welcome to examine their priorities. Another reporter. Maya, how do you feel about all this? Maya stepped forward to the microphone, her 7-year-old voice clear and steady. I feel like I finally know where I come from, and I feel like everyone deserves to belong somewhere, no matter what they look like or where they started. The press conference ended with father and daughter walking hand in hand back into the Sterling Industries building, while social media exploded with support for Maya's simple, profound statement about belonging. But even as the immediate crisis resolved, Victoria Sterling sat in her study, watching the news coverage and realizing that her attempt to manage the Maya situation had not only failed, it had made her granddaughter a more powerful symbol than ever. With David Mitchell exposed as a fraud, and Maya finally knowing her father, they thought the hardest part was over. They were wrong. The biggest challenge was still ahead, because belonging isn't given, it's earned, and Maya was about to prove she belonged everywhere. The Pinewood Preparatory Academy Board of Trustees meeting was scheduled for Monday evening, ostensibly to address recent irregularities in admission procedures and community concerns. In reality, it was Maya Johnson's trial. Marcus arrived early, wearing his most expensive suit like armor. He'd spent the weekend with his legal team, preparing for what he knew would be an attempt to force Maya's withdrawal from the school, despite her academic performance, and the resolution of the paternity question. The boardroom was packed beyond capacity. All 37 PTA families were represented, along with faculty, administration, and several Sterling Industries board members who had arrived to support Marcus despite their previous concerns. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Board Chairman William Ashford called the meeting to order with the grave formality usually reserved for sentencing hearings. We're here tonight to address concerns raised by our parent community regarding recent admission irregularities and the media attention affecting our school environment. Rebecca Foster, the admissions director, looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Maya Johnson's admission was unconventional, but her academic performance has been exemplary. She's testing above grade level in mathematics and reading comprehension, and her teachers report excellent social integration. That's not the issue, Richard Pemberton interrupted. The issue is precedent. If we allow admission procedures to be bypassed for wealthy donors, we compromise the integrity of our entire system. Dr. Elena Rodriguez raised her hand. Richard, with respect, your own son was admitted despite test scores that fell below our usual standards, based on your family's legacy status. How is that different from merit-based admission following a substantial donation? The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. Marcus stood slowly. May I address the board? Chairman Ashford nodded. Mr. Sterling, you have 5 minutes. I don't need 5 minutes, Marcus replied. Maya Johnson belongs at Pinewood Academy because she's brilliant, curious, and hard-working. She earned her place here the moment she raised her hand in Mrs. Thompson's class and explained complex mathematical concepts that half the adults in this room couldn't grasp. Everything else, the donation, the media attention, the family complications, is irrelevant noise. Catherine Walsh raised her hand. Mr. Sterling, no one questions Maya's intelligence, but we must consider the broader impact on our school community, the media attention, the scrutiny of our families and traditions. The scrutiny that revealed parents talking about a 7-year-old child like she was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be welcomed? Marcus interrupted. Perhaps that scrutiny was exactly what this community needed. Margaret Hayes stood up, her voice carrying decades of social authority. Mr. Sterling, you're asking us to compromise standards that have maintained Pinewood's excellence for over a century. Standards that ensure our children are surrounded by families who share our values and can contribute meaningfully to our community. What values? The voice came from the back of the room. Everyone turned to see Maya herself, holding Miss Thompson's hand. She had asked to attend the meeting and Marcus had agreed, believing she had the right to hear what adults were saying about her future. What values? Maya repeated, walking slowly toward the front of the room with the kind of dignity that silenced controversy through pure presence. Because I've been listening to the grown-ups talk about me for weeks now, and I think there might be some confusion about what values actually matter. Chairman Ashford looked panicked. Young lady, this is an adult meeting. About me, Maya said simply. So I think I should get to talk. She reached the front of the room and turned to face the assembled parents. At 7 years old, standing in front of 37 wealthy, powerful adults who were debating her worth, Maya Johnson showed more poise than most people develop in a lifetime. My name is Maya Johnson, and I'm smart. Really smart. I can solve math problems that make 8th graders cry, and I can read books that most of you probably haven't read. I'm also kind. I help other kids with their homework, even when they're not nice to me. I'm curious about everything, and I ask good questions, and I always tell the truth even when it's hard. The room was completely silent. Some of you think I don't belong here because my mom is a nurse instead of a CEO, or because my skin is brown instead of white, or because I didn't have money until my dad found me. But belonging isn't about where you start. It's about who you choose to be and how you treat other people. Maya looked directly at Margaret Hayes. Mrs. Hayes, you said families should share values and contribute meaningfully to the community. I agree. So what values do you think are most important? Is it having lots of money? Or is it working hard, being smart, helping others, and treating everyone with respect? Margaret Hayes opened her mouth, then closed it again. Maya continued. Because if it's the first thing, then maybe you're right and I don't belong here. But if it's the second thing, then maybe some of you are the ones who don't belong here. The 7-year-old girl who had whispered, I'm poor so they won't let me in just 3 weeks earlier, had become someone who could make a room full of adults examine their consciences. I'm not asking you to like me or my family or the fact that everything got complicated and public. I'm just asking you to judge me by who I am, not by who you think I should be. And if you can't do that, then maybe Miss Thompson is right and the problem isn't with me. Maya turned to Marcus. Can we go home now? I have homework to finish. As they walked toward the door, Dr. Rodriguez began to clap. Slowly other parents joined her, not all of them, but enough to create a sound that echoed through the boardroom like thunder. Chairman Ashford called for a recess, but the real decision had already been made. Maya Johnson had not only defended her right to belong at Pinewood Academy, she had redefined what belonging meant. When 7-year-old Maya stepped up to the microphone at the PTA meeting, every adult in that room expected a child's plea. What they got instead was a voice that would echo through history. The vote was 31-6 in favor of Maya Johnson's continued enrollment at Pinewood Preparatory Academy. More importantly, the board approved a complete revision of admission policies, creating merit-based scholarships and eliminating legacy preferences that had excluded qualified students for decades. Dr. Helena Rodriguez was appointed to head a new diversity and inclusion committee, with Maya's story serving as the catalyst for systemic change. But the most significant transformation happened 3 days later, when Victoria Sterling appeared unannounced at Maya's classroom. Maya looked up from her reading circle to see an elegant older woman standing in the doorway, speaking quietly with Miss Thompson. There was something familiar about her posture, her carefully controlled expression, the way she seemed to command attention without saying a word. "Maya," Miss Thompson said gently, "there's someone here to see you." Maya approached cautiously. At 7, she had developed a keen sense for adult intentions, and this woman radiated the kind of authority that usually meant complicated conversations. "Hello, Maya. I'm Victoria Sterling. I'm your father's mother." Maya studied her carefully. "You're my grandmother." "Yes. Are you here to tell me I don't belong somewhere?" The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. In all her years of social maneuvering and family management, she had never been confronted so directly by someone so young about the impact of her actions. "No, sweetheart. I'm here to apologize." Maya tilted her head with the kind of curiosity that her teachers had learned meant she was processing complex information. "For what?" Victoria knelt down to Maya's eye level, her silk dress and pearls somehow making her look more vulnerable rather than more imposing. "For forgetting that belonging isn't about who your family is or how much money you have. For being so worried about what other people might think that I forgot to think about what was right. Did you try to make that man say he was my dad instead of Marcus?" Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "Yes, I did. And that was wrong." "Why did you do it?" The question came without accusation, just genuine curiosity about adult motivations that had seemed incomprehensible to a 7-year-old mind. "Because I was scared," Victoria admitted. "Scared that having you in our family would change things, scared that people would judge us, scared that I didn't know how to be a grandmother to someone so extraordinary." Maya considered this. "Are you still scared?" "Terrified. But now I'm more scared of missing the chance to know you than I am of what other people might think." Maya nodded solemnly. "That's good. Being scared of missing something is better than being scared of having something." Victoria Sterling, who had intimidated CEOs, influenced elections, and commanded social circles for 3 decades, felt tears gathering in her eyes at the wisdom of her 7-year-old granddaughter. "Maya, would you like to have dinner with me sometime, just us? I'd like to learn about who you are when there aren't cameras or meetings or other people making everything complicated. Can we have chicken nuggets? The dinosaur-shaped ones?" Victoria smiled for the first time in weeks. "We can have whatever you want. And can you tell me stories about my dad when he was little, and about my great-grandparents, and about what it means to be a Sterling?" "I would love to tell you all of those things." Maya reached out and took Victoria's perfectly manicured hand in her small, paint-stained one. "Okay, but Grandma Victoria, next time you're scared about family stuff, maybe just ask me what I think instead of making up complicated plans that hurt people's feelings." Deal. That evening, Marcus received a call from his mother. "I had dinner with Maya tonight," Victoria said without preamble. "How did that go?" "She's extraordinary, Marcus. Brilliant, thoughtful, kind. And she made me realize something important." "What's that?" "The Sterling family legacy isn't about maintaining exclusivity or protecting old traditions. It's about using our resources and influence to create opportunities for extraordinary people to flourish. Maya doesn't need to change to fit into our family. Our family needs to change to deserve her. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What are you saying, Mother? I'm saying that I want to establish the Maya Johnson Sterling Foundation. Scholarships for brilliant children who need opportunities. Support for schools committed to actual merit rather than inherited privilege. And I want Maya to be involved in the decisions about how it's run, because she understands belonging in ways that we've forgotten. The board will do what's best for Sterling Industries and the Sterling family. And what's best is having a 7-year-old remind us that our job isn't to keep people out. It's to help deserving people get in. Meanwhile, at Pinewood Academy, subtle changes were already taking place. The hallway conversations had shifted from whispers about Maya's background to discussions about her ideas. She had started a peer tutoring program where struggling students could get help without judgment. She had convinced the art teacher to display student work based on creativity rather than technical perfection. She had asked Miss Thompson why the library didn't have more books about kids who looked like her, leading to a complete diversity audit of the curriculum. Maya Johnson Sterling, she had chosen to hyphenate her name, saying it honored both where she came from and where she belonged, was not just adapting to Pinewood Academy. She was transforming it. On Friday afternoon, as Marcus picked her up from school, Maya climbed into the car with the kind of satisfied exhaustion that comes from a week well spent. "Good week?" he asked. "Really good week. I helped Tommy Chen with his math, and Mrs. Rodriguez asked me to help plan the new scholarship program, and Grandma Victoria is taking me to the Natural History Museum tomorrow." "Sounds perfect." Maya buckled her seatbelt and looked out the window at Pinewood's ivy-covered buildings. "Dad?" "Yes? I think I finally understand what belonging really means." "What's that?" "It's not about convincing other people you deserve to be somewhere. It's about being so truly yourself that you make the place better just by being there." Marcus Sterling, who had spent his entire adult life building companies and accumulating wealth, realized that his greatest achievement was sitting in the back seat of his car, teaching him about success. 1 year later, as Maya walked through the halls of Pinewood Preparatory as student body president, she carried with her not just her father's name, but a legacy that would inspire children across the nation. But this was just the beginning. 1 year later, the auditorium at Pinewood Preparatory Academy buzzed with anticipation as Maya Johnson Sterling approached the podium. At 8 years old, she was the youngest student body president in the school's 127-year history, elected by her peers not because of her father's wealth or her family's influence, but because of her ideas. The annual Founders' Day speech was traditionally delivered by a member of the Board of Trustees or a distinguished alumnus. This year, by unanimous vote, the honor went to the little girl who had arrived at Pinewood's gates with nothing but hope and had transformed not just the school, but everyone in it. Marcus sat in the front row next to Jasmine and Victoria, watching their daughter, their granddaughter, with pride that felt almost too large to contain. Behind them sat Dr. Rodriguez, Miss Thompson, and even Margaret Hayes, whose own transformation over the past year had been as remarkable as anyone's. "Good morning," Maya began, her voice clear and confident. "A year ago, I stood outside these gates and whispered that I was too poor to belong here. Today, I want to talk about what I've learned about belonging, about family, and about how we can make sure every child gets the chance to discover who they're meant to become." She paused, looking out over an audience that included not just Pinewood families, but representatives from schools across the country who had come to hear about the Pinewood model of inclusive excellence that Maya's story had inspired. Belonging isn't something you achieve by meeting other people's expectations. Belonging is something you create by being brave enough to show up as yourself and generous enough to make space for others to do the same. In the back of the auditorium, James Pemberton, now 12 and serving as the school's first student diversity advocate, recorded Maya's speech on his phone, not to expose adult hypocrisy this time, but to share her message with students at other schools who were fighting their own battles for belonging. This year, Pinewood changed. We created merit-based scholarships that brought in students like Sarah Kim, whose parents are grocery store owners, and Marcus Williams, whose mom is a firefighter. We started the peer tutoring program that helped everyone improve their grades by helping each other instead of competing. We added books to our library by authors who look like all of us, not just some of us. Maya's voice grew stronger as she continued. But the most important change wasn't in our policies or our programs. It was in how we think about what makes a school, a family, or a community excellent. Excellence isn't about keeping people out. Excellence is about bringing out the best in everyone who's brave enough to try. In the Sterling family section, Victoria wiped away tears she didn't bother hiding. The woman who had once seen Maya as a threat to family traditions now understood that Maya was the family tradition, the embodiment of everything the Sterling name should represent. My dad always tells me that the best investments are the ones that create value for everyone, Maya continued. This year Pinewood invested in kids like me, kids who didn't have trust funds or legacy admissions, but who had dreams and talent and the determination to succeed. And what we discovered is that when you invest in potential instead of privilege, everyone benefits. The audience erupted in applause, but Maya wasn't finished. Next year, the Maya Johnson Sterling Foundation will award scholarships to 100 students across the country. But more than that, we'll work with schools to create environments where every student, regardless of their background, has the chance to discover their gifts and use them to make the world better. She paused, her 8-year-old face serious with the weight of what she was about to say. A year ago, I thought belonging was about convincing other people to let me in, Maya continued, her voice carrying the wisdom that had amazed adults since the day she'd whispered at Pinewood's gates. But I learned that real belonging is about making sure the next person doesn't have to fight the same fight I did. It's about opening doors so wide that they can never be closed again. The standing ovation that followed was spontaneous and thunderous. Students, parents, faculty, and visiting educators rose to their feet as Maya Johnson Sterling, 8 years old and already changing the world, smiled with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was meant to be. As the applause died down, Maya looked directly at her family in the front row. I want to thank my mum, who taught me that intelligence without kindness is just showing off. My dad, who taught me that having power means using it to protect people who don't have any. And my grandmother, who taught me that it's never too late to choose to be better than you were yesterday. She turned to address the entire audience one final time. To every kid watching this who feels like they don't belong somewhere, remember that you don't need permission to be extraordinary. You just need courage to keep trying and compassion to help others along the way. Maya stepped back from the podium as the audience rose again, this time in recognition not just of her words, but of the transformation she represented. In 12 months, she had gone from a child whispering, "I'm poor so they won't let me in," to a young leader declaring that belonging was something you created, not something you earned. 3 months later, the first annual Maya Johnson Sterling Foundation Scholarship Ceremony took place in the very auditorium where Maya had given her Founders' Day speech. 100 students from across the country, children who had faced their own gates, their own whispers of inadequacy, their own fights for belonging, received full scholarships to schools committed to inclusive excellence. Maya stood again at the podium, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Sarah Kim and Marcus Williams, the Pinewood students she had mentioned in her speech, along with scholarship recipients from schools in 43 states. "We're not here because someone felt sorry for us," Maya announced to the packed auditorium. "We're here because someone recognized that talent and determination come in all colors, from all neighborhoods and with all kinds of family stories. We're here because we earned it." In the audience, Marcus held Jasmine's hand while Victoria beamed with the pride of a grandmother, watching her granddaughter change the world. Nearby, Dr. Rodriguez sat with Miss Thompson, both of them marveling at how a 7-year-old's courage had created ripples that were still spreading. "But this isn't the end of our story," Maya continued. "This is just the beginning. Because every one of us in this room has a responsibility now. We have to use our education, our opportunities, and our voices to make sure that 10 years from now, no child has to whisper, 'I'm too poor to belong anywhere.' We have to build a world where belonging is a right, not a privilege." The ceremony concluded with something unprecedented. Instead of individual photos with diplomas, all 100 scholarship recipients stood together on stage, while Maya led them in a pledge she had written herself. "We promise to remember where we came from and to never forget the gates that were closed to us. We promise to work hard, dream big, and lift others as we climb. We promise that when we have the power to decide who belongs, we will choose inclusion over exclusion, courage over comfort, and hope over fear. We promise to make sure that our success becomes a ladder for others to climb. 5 years later, 13-year-old Maya Johnson Sterling stood in the Rose Garden of the White House, having been invited to speak at the President's Education Summit as the youngest advocate for educational equity in American history. The Maya Johnson Sterling Foundation had awarded scholarships to over 10,000 students, and the Pinewood model had been adopted by private schools across the nation. But perhaps more importantly, Maya had grown into exactly the kind of person her 7-year-old self had promised to become: brilliant without arrogance, successful without forgetting her roots, and powerful without losing her compassion. As she prepared to address an audience that included the Secretary of Education, congressional leaders, and education advocates from around the world, Maya thought back to that morning outside Pinewood's gates when she had whispered 6 words that changed everything. "I'm poor, so they won't let me in." Now speaking to leaders who shaped educational policy for millions of children, Maya's message was simple but revolutionary. Every child deserves a chance to discover who they're meant to become. Our job as adults is to open doors, not guard them. Our job as a society is to invest in potential, not just privilege. And our job as human beings is to make sure that no child ever has to whisper that they're too poor, too different, or too anything to belong. The speech was broadcast live to schools across the country, where thousands of children who saw themselves in Maya's story understood that their dreams were not just valid, they were vital. 10 years later, Dr. Maya Johnson Sterling graduated summa cum laude from Harvard University, with degrees in both education policy and social justice. Her graduation speech, titled "From Whispers to Voices: How We Build Belonging," was watched by over 50 million people worldwide. But the moment that mattered most happened afterward, when Maya walked across the campus where her father had once studied, reflecting on the journey that had brought her family together and changed countless lives along the way. Marcus, now 51, and having stepped back from day-to-day business operations to focus on the foundation, walked beside his daughter with the quiet pride of a man who had discovered that his greatest achievement wasn't building a company, it was being present for every moment of Maya's remarkable journey. Jasmine, now head of pediatric nursing at Greenwich Hospital, and having completed her master's degree with Maya's encouragement, marveled at how far they had all come from that morning when she had run to the gates of Pinewood Academy, desperate and afraid. Victoria, 73 and the Foundation's most effective fundraiser, had spent the last decade ensuring that Maya's vision of inclusive excellence spread to schools across the globe. She had discovered that her greatest legacy wouldn't be maintaining old traditions, it would be helping create new ones. As they walked together through Harvard Yard, Maya reflected on the ripple effects of that 6-word whisper at a school gate. Thousands of scholarships awarded, hundreds of schools transformed, countless children who no longer had to fight for the right to belong. "What's next?" Marcus asked his daughter. Maya smiled, her expression carrying the same mixture of hope and determination that had characterized her since childhood. "Next, we make sure that every child in America has access to an excellent education, regardless of their zip code, their parents' income, or the color of their skin. Next, we build a world where no child ever has to whisper that they don't belong. Think we can do it?" Maya looked at her father, her mother, and her grandmother. The family that had been forged not by blood alone, but by the choice to show up for each other through every challenge and celebration. "We've already started," she said. "That little girl who whispered at the gate, she didn't just get into one school, she opened doors for everyone who comes after her. And that's how you change the world. One whisper that becomes a voice, one voice that becomes a chorus, one chorus that becomes a revolution." As the Sterling family walked into the sunset, their story became part of something larger. Proof that courage can come from the smallest voices, that belonging is something we create together, and that sometimes the most powerful force for change is a child brave enough to believe that they deserve a place at every table where dreams are served. And in classrooms around the globe, teachers began each year by telling their students Maya's story, ending with the same message that had echoed through 13 years of transformation: you belong here. Not because someone let you in, but because you chose to show up as yourself and make this place better just by being part of it. If Maya's courage inspired you to stand up for what's right, drop voice in the comments below. Like this video if you believe every child deserves to belong, and subscribe for more incredible stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Until next time, keep believing that your voice matters.